All right. Hello, everybody. Today's Wednesday, the 17th. Yes, the 17th of February, 2021. I'm Royce Fletcher Thomason, and I'm here to share, as I am every Wednesday, for our Wednesday Hope and Healing Hour, where we offer hope, encouragement. If anybody is in need of some actual physical healing or mental, emotional healing, a lot of times we provide that right through the broadcast on both Facebook and YouTube. And today we've got a special focus for today. And today's focus is restoration of power. Restoration of power is our focus for today. I'm seeing a signal that says the signal is unstable, so hopefully this is still continuing to go through. We're just going to carry through as if it is, and hopefully you all will be able to see this and everything. So the focus of this week is restoration of power. I'm here in Tampa, Florida. That's where we're broadcasting from now. I moved here just a few months ago, but prior to that, I lived for several years in Houston, Texas, and originally being from Detroit, Michigan. And so, you know, it's a little bit of a difficult time for the folks in Houston, Texas right now. I would like all of us to lift the people in Houston and the state of Texas as a whole in prayer, to hold them in the light and send forth radiant, positive intentions for them, for their well-being. I have a lot of people that I know in Houston, obviously, and friends and such, as a result of living there for so long. And we're just lifting them up because it's been unusually cold there, and there have been a tremendous number of losses. The way that it's worded is power outages. And so a lot of people this week have been struggling with that. And I know that I got information that over 60-something% of the people in Houston were without power, had lost electricity. Okay. And, you know, folk, to be honest, people there aren't used to the cold. They're not used to having to navigate the cold weather. They're just not used to that. They're not used to having to figure out how to drive when there's some snow on the ground or some ice on the ground. Now, being from Michigan, that's not anything that's by any means unfamiliar territory. Hey, how you doing, Jennifer? Welcome, my sister. It's always good to see you. For some reason, can't see your picture today, but anyway, welcome nonetheless. Good to have you as always. In fact, I was just thinking about you just before the broadcast started. And much love to everybody who's out there. So I'm going to give kind of some background information, and then we're going to get into really the essence of the topic. So there are all of these people who are without electricity. And, you know, I still work with a nonprofit that's based in Houston. So I've got a lot of ties there. And I was receiving this information directly that there was so much loss of power. Hey, Joy, much love to you, my sister. That there was a lot of loss of power, if you will. A lot of people lost power. And they said that to me, I'm thinking it kind of was a little bit confusing to me, because they said that the demand exceeded what they were able to supply, which was a little strange to me, like I said. But interestingly, I thought back in my mind, Houston is a different kind of place. You know, you all right remember when the gas prices went up really high in a lot of places, well, everywhere really. And a lot of people were very negatively affected by that. Well, it was starting to come back down to some degree when I first arrived in Texas, when I first moved to Texas. It was like in the $3 and some change range. So one of the things that's interesting is because the two major industries in Houston, Texas are healthcare. It is the home of the largest medical center in the world, and energy, if you will, oil and gas, another dominant industry in the fourth largest city in the country. Texas, besides beef, is very, very well known for oil, for energy, if you will. And so, you know, I'm thinking this is odd. Why is it, you know, just for a short period of time, it's kind of cold. I mean, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. You know, it'd be cold all winter long. What, you know, and New York is a very large state, and it's cold all winter long. Chicago, the same. I mean, Illinois, same. It's cold all year long, but they don't have those kind of mass power outages because of people needing to heat their homes. So I thought that was interesting, and then I continued communicating, and they were sharing with me that it had to do with the grids. The electric grids were not set up to be able to handle that much energy. Okay. And so the result is that all of these people lost electricity in their homes. There are people, they don't have hot water. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't have running water at all. I had never heard of people losing water when they lost electricity. That was new to me. But anyway, I want to kind of break down some things in terms of principles and how things work. I want to first acknowledge that all authentic power is born of God. All right. Probably not a surprise to any of you all that I'm saying that. That all authentic power is born of God. We are living in this physical relationship to life. But our life extends beyond just this physical stuff. But we're here to enjoy life, to thrive in the process of living. And there is great value in doing everything that we can to promote the abundance of life, the energetic flow of life blossoming and thriving. Unfortunately, there's something about a little bit of warped sense of perspective within human beings in terms of really flowing in life. I saw something many years ago that said if all of the insects on planet Earth suddenly died, within 3 years there would be no more life on the planet, on the surface of the planet. Similarly, it said if all humans on the planet died, within that same time period, life on the planet would truly thrive. Now that's an unfortunate circumstance. That's an unfortunate situation. I think about, you know, the healing methodology that we utilize. We've utilized it here in the lives on many occasions, doing live healings right on the air. The name of the methodology is called Transcending the Matrix. Yes, it was inspired by the Matrix trilogy of movies. And in that first Matrix movie, Agent Smith had Morpheus. He was interrogating him, and in this interrogation, he was actually likening humans to a virus, because a virus seeks to kind of take over things. It doesn't give to, it just takes away from and strips life away from, like this coronavirus that we've been dealing with for the better part of the last year. There is something in a twisted perspective of life and of living and how things were innately, divinely designed to be, and how we at times miss the mark. Okay, we miss the mark. And the result of us missing the mark is evil. It's evil. Now, if you take the word evil and you flip it around, evil is simply live backwards. Okay? It's simply live backwards. God, in the infinite wisdom, the most high creator of all living things, all that is, had a master plan for the design of life, not just human life, but life as a whole. And when we are operating our best, we are operating in alignment with that divine design. Now, within you and I, we are physically, from a physical standpoint, we're made up of a conglomeration of billions and trillions of cells. There are two, out of all of those billions and trillions upon trillions of cells, there are two cells that are more significant than any other cell in the body. Okay, two cells that are more significant than any other cell of the body. And those are referred to as the creator cell and the master cell. Now, the creator cell is the first cell that we ever were, when that sperm met that egg. And from, it's referred to as the creator cell because from it, all other cells stemmed off. Okay? From it, and it sits at the base of our spine, within the coccyx at the base of our spine. From it grew our central nervous system, our limbs, our heart, our lungs, our diaphragm, all of the organs of our body, our skin tissue, our hair follicles, all of the cells of our body stemmed from that first cell that we were. Now, the other cell that is of prime importance in the human body is referred to as the master cell. The master cell sits within the pineal gland of the brain. The pineal gland is this almond-shaped gland that sits dead center in the very center of the brain. Now, the human brain is powerful beyond measure. We are typically using 5 to 10% of our brain capacity. The utter genius of Albert Einstein, and his utter genius, he was perceived to have used about 17% of his brain capacity. I really like, and there were a couple of movies that kind of dealt with brain capacity and people realizing a greater degree of their brain potential. One of those movies was called Limits. I think it was starring Bradley Cooper. That may not be accurate. I think it was starring Bradley Cooper. They had some stuff. Unfortunately, I don't think that it really got as deep into it as I would have liked to have seen it. But then a few years later, Scarlett Johansson started a movie called Lucy. And Lucy, I thought, captured much more significantly the power that exists within human potential when we really tap into all that has actually innately and been divinely designed and planted within us as part of our own divine blueprint. Hey, Trisha C., good to see you today. Hope that Jimmy's doing well and your dad. So there is so much power in each and every one of us that's yet untapped. There's so much power in all of us that God has designed us to be able to have access to, if we can find access to it and use it responsibly. And I think that's the key. Within our human structure, you might know that the building blocks of life are referred to as DNA. And there are these two strands, these double helixes that contain various nitrogen bases and aminos. I'm not going to get too deep into it, to a DNA lesson right now, but it is our essential makeup. Our essential makeup can be found within our DNA. Well, in addition to those 2 strands of physical DNA, we've got a whole lot of spiritual DNA. And we have more spiritual DNA than we have physical DNA, because who we are is more spiritual than physical. The essence of who we are is really spiritual, and the bigger part of who we are is spiritual. A smaller percentage of who and what we are is actual physical, wearing these earth suits, although that's the part that we tend to tap into the most a lot of the time, because it's tangible. It's the most you can feel it, you can touch it, you can feel it. It's easy to recognize pain or pleasure when it's going on in the physical body. And so anyway, there is within all of us so much. There's so much that's within all of us. And if we can be in complete alignment, you know what exists between the master cell in the pineal gland of the brain and the creator cell and the coccyx in our tailbone? What exists between there is our central channel. Our spinal column is along that, okay, between that space. And the idea is that there is complete alignment between the master cell and the creator cell. Now, by the way, the reason that the master cell is called the master cell is because it's central command in terms of the human functioning of the body. The master cell in the pineal gland gives instructions to all of the other cells in the body of what it is that they are to do. It gives the instructions. Okay, and all your physical body is a bunch of different cells, and each cell has its own function, it has its own job, has its own responsibility. Whether it is a T cell within the immune system, or a brain cell, which is referred to as a neuron, or whether it's a liver tissue cell or a muscle tissue cell. All of the different cells of the body have their own different function, their own different responsibility. They all have their own brain housed within the nucleus of the cell. Okay, and every moment, the pineal gland, the master cell within the pineal gland, is sending out signals to all of the rest of the cells in the body to help them line up to support the greater good of the whole body. Okay, are you with me now? Okay, Edward Robinson's a greeting to you, brother. The thing about it is that sometimes what the master is saying and what we are actually creating in our lives does not always line up. There's a disconnect somewhere along the way where what it is that we're creating, what it is. See, there's this thing about energy, and that's kind of the theme of today. Energy, power, alignment, all of that is kind of our theme for today. And so it is a law that where attention goes, energy flows, that energy follows consciousness, that thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. All of these things are different ways of saying that. You know, there's another law in science that that says as above, so below. There are a lot of different ways that can be broken down. One of the ways that can be broken down is what's going on in here is going to be made manifest in what's going on out here. All right. Okay. Now, when we are in alignment with the divine design according to which God intended all life to flow in, things are going well. Okay. We're able to enjoy life in that more abundantly. However, when we get off track, when we turn in another direction, we end up getting messed up. things start to fall apart. What happens is that we end up getting disconnected from the power source. And in the process of getting disconnected from the power source, we end up losing power. Okay. And then we sometimes look at illusory things. We look at other things as substitutions for authentic power. And we might use force, or we might try to use influence, or we might try to use money as a substitute for real authentic power. There is he was a brilliant man, Dr. David Hawkins, a psychiatrist and a PhD. He had 2 doctoral degrees, and he's written several books. One of them was a book entitled Power versus Force. And what that is really delineating and breaking down is that what we see as a way of having some sense of power is really a false sense of power. Okay, what he refers to as force. Okay, but real authentic power is something that comes from within. It's something that we're innately endowed with, and it is a function of our union with the power source, with God. Okay, and being in alignment with that, and eliminating the restrictions from walking in the flow with that, is when we are walking in the most power, and when we are the most fully ourselves, created in the image likeness of divine perfection itself. So were we. Okay, and so when we are in alignment, we're doing much better than when we're not. The problem is that we often get out of alignment because there's something in this third dimensional perspective of what we call reality, which is really what some would call illusion. The Sanskrit, in the ancient Sanskrit, there's a term called Maya, which means that simply that things aren't as they seem. And so we get caught up in the world of how things seem instead of focusing on how things actually are. And they're all kind of different power struggles and things that we go through in that. We deal with this third dimensional matrix of separation and limitation. In the context of limitation, we perceive all of life from the perspective of lack. In perceiving it from the perspective of lack, we think that if somebody else has that, then we can't have. People see that in terms of power, quote unquote power, worldly power. People in positions of quote unquote worldly power frequently don't want to give that power up. When I was majoring in political science in college, there were a lot of definitions that were shared with us in terms of people's perspectives of power. And one of those things is that power doesn't concede to anything other than a power greater than itself. Okay. Another thing that was said was power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But all of these things are from the standpoint of a physical third dimensional perspective of power, which is really more what David Hawkins would refer to as force. It's a total misunderstanding of what real power is. And so, yes, part of this nature of this third dimensional beliefs of separation and limitation is that of there's not enough to go around for everybody. And so that's where greed comes in. That's where trying to have power over other people comes in. That has to do with a lot of fear-based thinking. The other thing with that third dimensional beliefs of separation and limitation is the idea that we are separate. The reality is that we are all one. As you see on the bottom of the screen, we're all the light of God. We are all of the light of God, and we are all one people, though we don't allow ourselves to see that. We might speak different languages. We might have different textures of hair and different complexions of skin. We might eat different types of food. We might relate to life itself in different ways. We might be different in many, many different ways, and there's beauty in that, in those nuances. There's beauty in having a great plethora of different types of flowers and plants. There's great beauty in having diversity in terms of the landscape of the planet. There's beauty in that. There's something in the infinite wisdom of God that caused it to be that way. I don't by any means think that that was a bad idea. I think that that was something that was part of the beauty in which God designed it all. And that includes the design of human beings as being differentiated from one another, though still always one. So we see, as human beings, we tend to see different as deficient. We tend to get this idea that if we are different from one another, then somebody must be better than somebody else. Somebody must be better than somebody else, and somebody must be worse than somebody else. Different doesn't have to mean that at all. But the thing is, with this, again, this fear-based thinking, this fear-based perspective, this fear-based frame of reference, these fear-based lenses of perspective through which we're viewing life, there's this idea that I don't want to be the one that's deficient. So I am going to project onto you so that you are the deficient one and not me. And so many people are doing that. And so we've got these issues that we've got going on from this sense of limitation. We've got these issues that are going on from this sense of different means deficient. All of it is locked into fear, and it manifests in a variety of different ways. Now, I want to kind of relate this. That relates and manifests in terms of health and the things that we see and we're able to work with people on in terms of their health conditions and health situations that they're struggling with. It's all attached to that. And also the things that we see in terms of, on a greater scale, things going on within society in different ways is also a function of that. Okay. All of it is a function of areas where we're living backwards. All of it is a function of what would be called evil. And I'm saying that because literally what it is to live backwards. It's just missing the mark, which is literally the definition of sin, is missing the mark. But there are a lot of connotations that people have with those words, but I'm wanting to kind of break down to a degree the essence of what is really at the heart of the matter as it relates to those words and how we can hopefully get back on track. And so, yes, we talked about how in Houston, where I had lived for the last several years until just a few months ago, and throughout the state of Texas, a lot of people are experiencing what they're referring to as power outages. Millions of people without quote unquote power. I usually say without electricity. And so what the reality is that it got cold and there was a need for more electricity than the electricity companies were in a position to make available for the people. Another thing that was different about Houston and that I had never experienced before is you have a choice of what electric companies you use. There are like a couple hundred of them. I'm from Detroit. There was one. Now all of it ends up going through this company called Centerpoint ultimately. But when I was there, I utilized a service called Green Mountain, which I happen to have enjoyed. And they were a very much a green company, and I appreciated the correspondence that they would regularly send me. But the thing about Texas is, as a state, there would be times where I would see, and I'm not trying to knock Texas, I'm not trying to knock Texans, I'm just sharing with you some things about the nature of reality, the divine design, and how operating out of alignment with that divine design can and will cause problems. Okay, and so again, this isn't a value judgment, it's just a fact. There have been points in history where the state of Texas has tried to break off from the United States of America and be its own, essentially its own sovereign body, its own country, if you will. In fact, I remember seeing things on people's cars while I was there that said the United States of Texas. It's part of the mentality that's there, okay? one of the things that's a challenge in terms of people not having access to electricity, and all of these people being in the cold with no electricity, and they, can't, well, they're not able to drive on the roads because they're not familiar with that. It's just not something they know how to do, and within the infrastructure, it's not built in for them to have the rock salt that they do in colder areas to help keep the roads clear, all of the trucks to help keep the roads clear and stuff like that. That's not a surprise. A lot of southern states don't have that kind of infrastructure in place. But what's different about Texas is that throughout the United States, there is an energy grid. Kind of like the unconditional love grid that we talk about in the Transcending the Matrix training. But there's an energy grid that essentially the entire country is connected on, okay, and can draw from. All right, that's the central command, if you will. Texas, however, and this is not a political thing either. There may be some things that might come across as political, but the reality is we're talking about the nature of life living in the divine design, okay? If it offends anybody from a political standpoint, so be it. But I'm not setting out to make a political statement. I'm setting out to make a spiritual statement. And if it has political implications, then it just has political implications. But Texas did not want to be a part of the greater energy grid of the country because there's a mentality of wanting to stay away from regulations, government regulations, okay? And so it has its own energy grid detached from the rest of the country, okay? And the reason for this was because they didn't want to be subject to government regulations from the larger body of the company, of the country. All right. Now, the reason that companies don't want to be, and this isn't just companies in Texas, this is companies in general, and a lot of large industries, companies in very large and very lucrative industries don't want there to be regulations in place. The reason for that is because, and let me say something about the nature of these regulations. Regulations are what requires food companies to put the ingredients on food. Okay, that regulations are what require companies to not take shortcuts, to make sure that the consumer, that the people are taken care of, that the people are protected, right? The people are protected, in terms of the air, in terms of toxins that are put in the environment, in terms of poisons that are put in food. And by the way, there's still a lot of poisons that get through the food alone. And there's a lot of lobbying and stuff that happens where essentially large corporations, in groups of large corporations in a particular industry, fund political campaigns in order to get people elected, but then they've bought favors, and the favors that they've bought are making decisions not on the behalf of the people who elect them, but on the behalf of the financial interest of the company or that particular industry. Okay, and that's just how the nature of the game works. All right, and so the situation in Texas, and you all remember this company called Enron, the infamous Enron. Enron was actually an energy company that was headquartered in Houston, Texas, before it became defunct and their leadership got thrown in prison. There was a lot of funny business that was going on. And the funny business that was going on is essentially what was being done is utilizing energy and electricity as a commodity to be sold and traded. okay, on the New York Stock Exchange. And there was some funny business that was going on in their accounting to make things seem better than they actually were. And so there's actually still a similar thing going on in Texas right now, where the power companies actually allowed the loss of power of millions of people, and people have been dying and stuff because it was cheaper to do that than to do what was necessary to provide the electricity. The cost of the electricity went from $22 to $9,000 overnight. And that was going to be very, very, very costly for these power companies, okay, quote unquote, power companies, all right? And the result is the people being negatively affected so that the companies wouldn't be negatively affected, rather than the other way around. And so profits were placed above people, and for much of human history, profits have been placed above people. There's this teaching that the root of all evil, to live backwards, is placing money above people, right? Placing money above people, all right? The root of that backwards living, what so frequently gets us off track, keeps us from being centered in our right mind. Remember that pineal gland in the very center of the brain, that master cell in the very center of the brain in the pineal gland? We get off-centered. We get off-centered, we miss the mark, and then problems start happening. Now, the reality is that something of great significance happened on the 21st of December last year, just a couple of months ago. A portal opened up. There's a shift that took place. This shift has been taking place. You can expect to see this shift speeding up, where it's time out for folk being concerned about only their interest and not the interest of the greater good. Those people, politicians, companies, systems that are focused more upon their own individual well-being to the demise of other people's well-being are not going to be able to continue to succeed. That is the nature of what's going on according to the divine design of how God created life. And we have been allowed to exist in a way where we've done that for so long, and we were thinking that we were getting away with it. How many times did you do something thinking that you were getting away with it, but then it caught up to you, where you maybe would have been better off if you got caught in the first place? But then the problem continued to persist, and then it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. Well, this is to a certain degree what's been happening. We have been allowed to do things from a certain standpoint that have caused destruction to other people, caused destruction to this beautiful planet that we all live on. Okay. Now, remember earlier when I was talking to you about the master cell and the creator cell, and if all of the cells in the body are in alignment with what the master cell is instructing, then we've got good health. Things are going well in our life. But sometimes there's an obstruction between the communication in the master cell and what's going on in the creator cell. And sometimes there is the case where rogue cells start to operate. Okay, that's what cancer is. Cancerous cells are cells that have created a magnetic field around them that disengage them, keep them from being able to receive the message from central command, the master cell in the pineal gland. And then it becomes a rogue cell. It says, we don't want to do what's good for the greater good. We want to do what we think is going to benefit us, without concern for what's going on with anybody else. And then what it does is it tries to recruit other cells. It tries to recruit other cells and says, hey, you know what? We don't have to go along with this plan. We've been sold a bag of tricks. We can break off and do our own thing and we'll be just fine. The thing about it is that that cancerous cell, that, what's the word that I'm looking for? There's a word that I'm looking for when something takes life from something else but doesn't give any life back to it. Parasite. That parasitic cell needs the host to live upon. It can't exist without the host. It can't live without the host. The thing is, it eats away at the host until it destroys the host and the host dies. Thus, it in its own foolishness has set up its own demise. That cancerous cell has set up its own demise because it's destroying the thing that allows it to be able to live in the first place. It's that mentality that says, why serve in heaven if you can rule in hell, right? That very backward thinking, that very twisted and backwards thinking. Now, before these revelations started coming to me, I had this sense that all of these quote unquote power outages that were taking place in Texas right now were the result of karma. And I can see it was only later that some other things started coming to me. And I'm not trying to offend anybody depending on where you are politically, because I'm not trying to make a political statement, but I do realize that how people operate in politics is a function of how they're operating in consciousness. I do realize how people operate in business is a function of how they're operating in consciousness. I realize that. Like I said earlier, I'm from originally from Detroit, Michigan. There was a pastor and a theologian that just about every seminarian learns about by the name of Reinhold Niebuhr. You all might not know Reinhold Niebuhr's name, but you know of his work because God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The Serenity Prayer, I recite that prayer every day. The Serenity Prayer was actually written by Reinhold Niebuhr. Reinhold Niebuhr wrote several books. One of those books was entitled Moral Man, Immoral Society. And in that book, he's talking about how individually a person can want to behave in a moral manner. But when they get in a collective and start thinking about this particular group and this group needs, and then somehow we tend to stray away from what we would normally find morally appropriate. And those ethical lines begin to be blurred. And we see that in companies and corporations. We see that in politics all the time. Okay. And so just like a cell will decide to break off and do its own thing. And again, I'm not bashing the people of Texas. I'm just saying we're talking about the nature of reality and divine law and what happens when operating outside of that. And as above, so below. What exists within the microcosm also exists in the macrocosm. We see things playing on various scales, but it's the same truth manifesting in different ways. Just like Texas has wanted to break off from the rest of the country and do its own thing, be its own entity aside from the United States. It's done that in terms of disengaging, not having their power grids as part of the rest of the power grids. And now it needs the greater body. It needs to feed off of the greater body, and yet it's not able to draw life from it. It's not able to draw power from it. Okay. And so it's in a state of being in deficit in terms of power, and a deficit in terms of energy, because it's broken off its sense of connectivity from that which actually fuels it and gives it the ability to really be able to live. But not only that, like the rogue cancerous cells, it tries to recruit other people to join along. And just not that long ago, the Attorney General of the state of Texas went starting this lawsuit trying to get other states involved with trying to contest an election. Now, what does that one state have to do with the certification of another state's vote. And they're trying to make things happen the way they believe it should be, rather than what the greater of the body is saying, regardless of what the greater body is saying. Okay, and so we've got all of these different ways. And again, I'm not trying to pick on Texas or the people of Texas. I love the people of Texas, and we're praying that people get their power restored. But the real power doesn't have anything to do with an energy company. However, what's going on there is nonetheless pointing to some of the challenges that we as human beings face when we fail to really recognize that we are all part of a bigger picture, that what is going on in life is bigger than us, that we can't expect that we are going to be able to break off from our power source and have things go well. We can't expect to miss the mark and have things work out the way that we want them to. We're going to miss the mark. All of us are going to miss the mark. That's part of the human predicament. But the key is when we realize that we are missing the mark, to try to get back on track. When we've gotten off center, to get back on center. Okay. When we are realizing that we've made a mistake, to not try to cover the mistake, but to try to restore the mistake. Try to not restore the mistake, restore things to how they really should be, to fix the mistake. Okay. And so, yes, we're praying for the restoration of power of all of the people in the state of Texas. But beyond that, we're praying for the restoration of power of the spiritual essence that exists within us. That's where, and really that power hasn't gone anywhere. We lose power because we tap into a false sense of power, and we think that there's some power coming from the things that we do to try to manipulate other people, or manipulate different situations, or things that we might try to throw money at, or these other things that we might do where we may try to put other people down in order to boost ourselves up, where we might stand in judgment of other people and condemn them, not realizing that we've got some stuff that we need to get in order within our own house. And we've got so much stuff, in fact, that we need to get together in our own house, that if we were really being diligent about doing that, we wouldn't have time to be judging other folks about where they're missing the mark. Okay, we'd be seeking to fix our own stuff, and maybe, hopefully, in the process, serving an inspiration to others to help them fix theirs. All right. Anyway, how are you all doing? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts out there? I see that there have been a lot of, or at least several comments. I've missed a lot of the comments. My apologies for that. But I hope that you've been able to find some value in this as it relates to our physical health. Every issue that takes place with our physical health is a function of a problem existing on a deeper level. There could be a spiritual imbalance, and if we haven't gotten it on the spiritual level, it'll manifest in the realm of the mental and emotional realms. And if we don't pick up on the disturbance and rectify it there, then it will ultimately make its way into the physical. And if we don't end up getting the point, getting the lesson, then that issue will end up taking us out physically. The root of all of the issues that we face is some misperspective, some way that we've gotten out of alignment, some area that we've not allowed the light of God's love and wisdom and peace and power to have rulership in our lives. Okay. Now, I believe that there is an opportunity for all of us to go deeper. I believe that there is an opportunity for all of us to find places within ourselves where there's some deficiencies of character, where there's some wrong thinking, where there's a twisted perspective. Oftentimes, we don't even recognize the filters through which we view life. the filters through which we view others, the filters through which we view even our own circumstances. And then as a result of that, we resist, and we judge, and we say disparaging things about ourselves and about others. But those things don't actually do anything to resolve the problem. When we do that, we're losing power. We're losing power. But the way we can have our power restored is by being really honest with ourselves, by acknowledging that there's something greater on the inside of us than anything that we can try to manipulate in the outside world, trusting that there is a plan greater than the plan we know, a landscape broader than the one we see, as the poet said, by recognizing, as God said to Job, where were you when I was creating the heavens and the earth? Where were you when I was putting the stars in the sky and creating the dirt that was gathered together to cause the earth to form? Where were you when I was bringing the volcanic eruption up from the belly of the earth that brought forth the minerals from which your physical body was designed? Where were you when I put into motion that all of the things that you would ever need to sustain you were already placed in the earth before you were? Okay, we have this kind of arrogance that we think that we know it all, using the 5 to 10% of the brain capacity that we have. We get the idea that we somehow know better than God. I'm guilty of that too, by the way. So I'm not trying to sit higher than thou. In my own foolishness, I question things too, things that don't make sense to me from my very, very, very limited perspective. But we do our best, me, you, and all of us, when we can face life with a degree of humility, recognizing that we don't have all the answers. Our only strength, our only power really comes from God. The Master Jesus even said when people were wondering and marveling at the miraculous things that he was doing, whether it be healings or other things that he was doing, said, listen, it's not me. It's the presence within me that is doing this work. It's the power of God that dwelleth within me that's doing this work. Don't get caught up in this physical stuff. And there was something else that he said, the same stuff that you see me doing, much greater works than these shall you do, because the same power that existed within him exists within you and me. And that power never has power over another. That's not power over someone else. It is power within oneself. Okay. And so as we get ready to close, I think about the story of a monk who was meditating up on a hill. And this man and his army came, and they were coming to take over. And this was before the times of guns, and this military leader had this sword in his hand, and the monk seemed completely unfazed by it, perturbed by this situation. The warrior looks at the monk and says, "Don't you see this sword in my hand? Don't you know that I could clear your head from the rest of your body with this sword and not be fazed by it?" The monk looked him in his eye and said, "Do you know that I could allow you to do that and not be fazed by it?" Now, which one had the power? Which one had the authentic power? The warrior needed the sword to feel powerful. He needed something external, something outside of himself, to feel a sense of power. And it was really force that he needed to feel some sense of power. The real power existed within the one that was drawing it from within, and said, my power isn't dependent upon external things. My power comes from within, from the source of all power itself. Now, I want to be like that monk. Now, in the face of that, do you think that the warrior actually ended up cutting the monk's head off? You decide. You figure it out for yourself and you decide. I want to tell you that each and every single one of us has been endowed with a power. Each and every single one of us has been given phenomenal power. It's just a matter of us tapping into it. It's just a matter of us gaining access to what is already within us. Greater is he that lives within thee than he that is within the world. There's power, and I get that that's put in masculine language, but greater is the power that exists within you. And you have given power, scripture says, over all of the power of the enemy. Okay? And if has been said by wise folks throughout time, if there is no enemy within, the enemy without can do me no harm. The greatest enemy is the one that exists within us, within our own consciousness, within our own twisted perspective. We just need to kind of clear the veil from our eyes and see things more clearly. And that starts with prayer and openness to be able to see things from a greater perspective. You know, there was a time where I said to God, I want to know your truth, not the truth of man. I want to know your truth. And God posed a couple difficult questions to me, but still I wanted God's truth. That required me to acknowledge that everything that I had ever believed could possibly be wrong. There's a lot of humility that comes with that. You can't really do that without a certain degree of humility. But God wants to bless us with authentic empowerment. God doesn't want us to see us weak. But when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable to the fact that the reality is that our essence is actually the divine spark of God within us, not the one thinking the thoughts. Okay. We get to choose what aspect of our being. We're multifaceted beings. We get to choose what aspect of ourselves we identify with. Unfortunately, most of us, most of the time, identify with our physical selves in the physical world, in our physical relationships to the world, in situations and circumstances. But the more we can identify with the divinity within us, the more we can identify with the divinity within others. The more we identify with the divinity within us and the divinity within others, the more we align with life. The more we actually live in alignment. The more we're in alignment, the less likely we are to miss the mark. Okay? And so that's the whole goal, is to be in alignment, connected to our power source. We've given up a lot of power over time. We've given our power away to people, to institutions, to circumstances. But we can have our power restored by tapping back in to the source of the power. Unapologetically, humbly and unapologetically. All right? Now, we didn't do any healings per se today, but we do all the time on here. I don't know if Trish is still here or not, or I don't know who's actually still here at the moment. But all of us have the power to heal, power to manifest healing on the behalf of others. We have the power to do all kinds of amazing things that we would consider to be miraculous. Okay, I'm blessed to be able to serve in that capacity, but I'm not the only one. The magic isn't me. The power is within me, but that same power is also within you. If you are interested in getting access to that, you know, we've got a training that's coming up actually next weekend. My goodness, the 26th, February 26th through 28th, we'll be having the training. We'll be doing it for the second time, totally virtually. So one not need be physically there. Oh, Trisha, you are here. Okay. You know, we'll be doing it remotely. The last time I did this, it was the first time ever that I did the training and nobody was that was in the class was even in the same state that I was in. But we're going to be gathering next weekend, the February 26th through the 28th. If you're interested in participating in the training, I'm more than happy to share with you what God has given me. There are only a limited number of people that I'm ever going to reach directly, but there are people you can perhaps reach, and people that you can be a blessing to in their lives, and help to experience, profound transformations in their health and in other areas of their life. Again, it's just a matter of getting access to that which is already inside of you, and I'm more than happy to share a roadmap with you. So if you're interested in that, send me a direct message either on Royce Fletcher Thomason, either on Facebook or on Instagram at Royce Fletcher Thomason. We also have actually just recently created a Transcending the Matrix Instagram account, and so you can send a message there as well. Pardon me. If, by the way, you don't hear from me within 24 hours, I get inundated with these messages sometimes, and sometimes so many come in that I miss some of them. So I'm just going to ask that if you don't hear from me within 24 hours, charge it to my head, not my heart. I probably did not even see it. So just reach out to me again if you don't within 24 hours. All right. Anybody have any closing questions or comments or thoughts that you'd like to share? Dr. Cafera says that your path has been cleared through the guidance offered today. All right. Amen to that. Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions or anything that they'd like to share before we get out of here for today? Anybody? Okie dokie. Well, I love you. You are loved. You are lovable. You are loving. You are loved. You are powerful. You are powerful. We are moving into a state of consciousness where we are transcending the love of power and moving to focus more significantly on the power of love. Will you join me in this? Can we do it together? Arm in arm, join forces for the greater good as beings of love and light on planet Earth. I love you guys. I'll see you soon. Take care now.